rocking and rolling.
I know if I click off of
yeah, it'll stop.
yeah.
It's weird. We got Discord for you. Don't worry, Chief.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I hope midterms are going well. But also, I'm probably not going to talk about that too much because I know all of us are probably here to not think about it. So, hi, it is I, the president, Briss. Yeah, and today I'm going to be talking about some anatomy and design. Unfortunately, you can't live with or without anatomy. Quite literally. It's an undeniable truth to be a great artist, you have to have strong fundamentals, which includes knowing your anatomy. As Dov Makargu says, art muggles may not know anatomy, but even they can tell when looking at something if it's not right. General anatomy, it's something that is inherently built into us as humans. We all have a vague idea of what our bodies consist of. Even Joe Schmo's never opened up a medical textbook a day in his life. I'm sure we've all been in that position where you see a drawing and you physically cringe because in your head you piece together what that looks like and how that would feel to be in that position. You're like, oh no, that's wrong. That's so wrong. Oh God. Literally most of Rob Liefeld's early stuff, and that's being generous, is a perfect example. Don't believe me? Something wrong here? Anything at all? Anything at all? So how do we avoid that? Well, there are inherent fundamentals that we can follow. Rules, if you must label it, and we'll come back to that. For instance, proportion. A lot of proportions in the human form can actually be derived from itself. Another quote from Dove, a person who is less than 5 to 6 heads tall is a human chibi. I took his constructive human anatomy class, and we did have a person who was 5 heads tall in our class. One of our assignments was to measure out our head and then compare it in comparison to our bodies. And yeah, he literally called someone a human chibi to their face. One of the funniest moments. That's good. The golden standard is around 8 heads. If you want to go into heroic scale, you up that to be 9, 10 heads tall. Think about a figure like Hercules or any good myth. That's going to be that range where they are quite literally larger than life. 7 to 6 you could probably get away with, but when you start hitting a person that is 5 heads tall, they are short. They are definitely shorter in comparison to the average standard. And that's something you can keep in mind if you're designing fantasy races. Dwarves, gnomes, halflings, all of them. You can play around with that head height they have to infer and have the viewer figure out like what size they are physically. But yeah. There's also another method. It's the half-head method. And this is something that Dove also taught in his constructive human anatomy class. And I kind of prefer this method if I'm going like with this, just because there's a lot more things that you can derive with a half head height. On average, it's 14 to 15 half heads. And the length of the neck is actually usually half a head, and it's the same for the length of your sternum and the length from I'm drawing a blank on the little bone tip, but from that to your navel, Yes, from that to your navel is also half a head. Yeah, you can play around with it more. And with this one, it helps a lot make sure everything's lining up properly, because obviously you know that the nipples would line up around the middle of your sternum. So it's just like a nice little checks and balance with this. But I mean, it's kind of up to you, like in your choice of if you use this. I honestly haven't touched these methods since I was class until now to teach you all, just because this isn't a way that my brain likes to process things or likes to work. It's definitely something that maybe after the fact I'll go in with a drawing just to double check that certain proportions are how I want them to be. But it's definitely not something that I inherently just kind of whip out all the time. Same for the eight heads. I actually don't think I use eight heads often, because again, this is like a rule, but I'll come back to that in a bit. Another example of direct proportions: your foot is the length of your forearm. Your face is the same length of your hand. If anyone remembers that joke in elementary school, like, if your hand's bigger than your face, you're stupid, and you put your hand up and the person slaps it into you. Yeah, I definitely got hit with that once or twice. The thigh and the calf are both also the same length, roughly. And your forearm is actually slightly bigger than your bicep, your upper arm. Sorry. Obviously, it's bigger than the bicep because the bicep is just a small muscle. But your forearm is roughly just slightly bigger than your upper arm, and you can actually, most people kind of grab and grip your shoulder when you compress your arm. It's something that, whereas with your leg, if you squat down, your heel directly lines up with your butt cheek, your glute. And this is all kind of gearing us to think like a designer. I mentioned earlier that proportions are kind of a rule, but the really, really awesome part about our jobs in being a designer is once you know a rule, you can break it. You got to break it in style. You got to break it with some tact, but you can break all the art rules you want, pretty much when you have a strong understanding of them and the fundamentals that support them. You don't have to map out heads for every character you draw. I don't really anymore, as I said a little bit ago. This is one of my favorite artists, Kaiserella. He's a really cool series where he makes characters out of like restaurant mascots or logos. Totally suggest that you check him out on Instagram. Big fan of his work. But his Green Goblin right here is like roughly 6 heads tall. Does it matter? No. He reads as a tall, gangly, like long person, right? He's got these long, spindly forearms that follow up into these the longer upper arms, the long thighs that seem to stretch on. It's all exaggerated. It's all simplified. It's stylized, but the figure 100% is believable and readable anatomically in how it's drawn. I can look at this. I can see where the tricep is, and if you can see the cursor, it's that rounded hump right there, because the tricep goes out that way and then curves back in because it inserts down towards the elbow. And since the arm is not in a compressed flex, the bicep is actually elongated and stretched out and not compressed. That's why there's no bump right there. But you see the deltoid, tricep, like it all still reads completely anatomically fine, even if it is exaggerated, drawn out, and stylized for animation, because they like having simplified images to move. And there's going to be a lot of TV Choi in the upcoming stuff, because everything that I'm going to mention and more are things that are available for free on her ArtStation to look at. Her YouTube, her Twitch streams. She's a really, really phenomenally great resource. She started out actually as an anatomy teacher and then transitioned into doing art. So if you want to learn anatomy, learn it from a person that is a master in that field. So I highly recommend you check her out. All of her stuff on ArtStation. You can click where she has her class demos at. And that's where I grabbed a lot of this stuff at. Super amazing resource. I can't stress that enough. Here is Dokubai. I might have mispronounced that. I don't play Rainbow Six Siege, but I know she's from that. This is TV Choi drawing her in a series of different styles, and each one is drawn differently, but has believable anatomy for that style of drawing. Even the gross little gremlin Chibi, it's believable in that style. Specifically, I stress that style. Obviously, Chibi proportions on like figure A would not work out at all. It'd be horrendous and ugly. But everything is in proportion to itself in the figure representation. So in B, she says the shape is pushed more, expressing personality, and anything that hinders gesture is taken out. It's a super expressive character. A, it's close to the original design. It doesn't require a lot of reinterpretation. Even the style is very on par with what was established in the original design. But it's super realistic, and I mean, hands down, believable, right? You look at that, and that's a human, that's a person. In C, the appeal and shape is pushed more, and the amount of details in the shoes and clothing is kept, whereas D, it starts to become all about shape and gesture being pushed more and everything being simplified. So you begin to lose some of the details. The shoes are a little messier and a little less clean because that's not the emphasis. You're focusing more on the shape and gesture and that initial read. But again, for the given style, all the anatomy reads correctly, and you don't second guess this. You definitely know that it's stylized, but you don't think anything is wrong. Beyond the head heights and the measurements, John Lowe once told me that everything broken up into boxes, and surprisingly, us humans are not different. There are dozens of generic forms and that you can start with and learn from and utilize in your underdrawing phases. And I'm not going to really list all that. Honestly, it's just something that I suggest you find what works for you. You explore, you create your own. I mean, I know a few people that don't even use like the box and bullet methods or any of like the cube. Trying to think of what those wooden drawing figures are called. Yeah, they don't.
Mannequins,
yes.
yeah.
You can have like the cube or the box mannequins, right? I know people don't do any of that stuff. This is all your experience and your adventure, so tailor it to yourself. If you don't like drawing humans as boxes, don't. Figure out what works for you. Gestural drawings, box forms, cylinder forms, the bullet box method, which Dove's a huge proponent for and teaches in his class. It's all just something with the idea that you're getting something on paper and that you're going to build off of it later on. So it's early stuff. It's expendable. It's perishable. It's not precious, right? Yeah. So I encourage you to just find what clicks for you. Find someone you like and see if how they do things works for you. Joints. There are lots of joints in the human body. I want to emphasize and kind of cover this separately just because it's really good knowledge that translates into a lot of other things. If you're creating an organism that is humanoid, you're going to have to you're going to have to know what joints it has, because that will directly inform how it moves, what kind of things it'll wear, as to not impede its movement, as well as, the different functions. Also mechs. It's really, really good to understand joints for mechs because as this diagram shows, in a much more simplified kind of look to it than the very serious scientific drawing. It's literally can just be broken down to a wheel on a peg for a pivot joint, or a ball in a socket joint, or the hinge joint, right? You see how very clearly and simple that these movements are, and you can apply this to mechs and other creatures and all that. I stress mechs just because I know it tends to be a harder thing for people to draw. But if you just think about it as think about them as boxy humans. Actually, going back to this, that first iteration where it's all cubes, that can be a good start to a mech, and then you just basically go in and start putting in these joints, maybe add some more plating, cover ups with some wires and stuff, little details, and then bam, you have a little generic mech, and it can also double up as a little human. Form directly implies the function. The ball goes into the socket and can freely rotate. The hinge can't move side to side. It only goes forward and back. Ellipsoidal, it moves in like a cone-like range. So that's like your hand, right? Your hand can't, I mean, at least mine can't perfectly go flat or go up against itself. It moves in more of like a very wide arc cone. And the pivot joint just rotates and spins. Obviously, there are things that come into play that inhibit these or restrain them. Your spine is kind of a pivot joint, but unlike owls, we can't turn our head all the way around, right? There's a limit due to nerves and tendons and muscles that attach it. And the same for the ball and socket. My shoulder can't go in a perfect free 360 just because there are things that quite literally just get in the way. But the intention is that with that joint, that the arm can move in a wider kind of arc and range because that's what's necessary for that limb. Same for the hips. Beneath the skin, I don't really have time to go through all the various muscular structures, the scientific names, etc. No matter how much I'd love to, that's just not really the point of this talk. It's good information, but time can be spent better. Like all great concept artists, so instead of going super in depth, we'll just cheat. We'll work fast like how we do. I do highly recommend learning the individual muscles though, or even the muscle groups. I have had an amazing time learning about the human body in anatomy classes and drawing classes. Even just going to the gym and like in between sets, looking at other people working out and seeing how their muscles move. It's awesome. It's almost like a little alien baby beneath the skin sometimes. Yes, based, Yanni, based. Simplified human shape, right? You can easily turn this anatomical, very meticulous, detailed anatomy drawing into this, where it's simplified shapes that still preserve the anatomy, but give you complete liberty to adjust or manipulate your proportions. Maybe you want an even smaller, squarer torso, and then like want to go Kaiba, give them 78% leg, right? These are all proportions that you can play around with once you understand how to deliver readable and believable forms. Even if you compress this chest, you still need the pecs. You still need the abdomen. the abs. You still need your obliques to the side, or serratus are less important, just because typically that's usually seen on people with very, very low body fat percentage. If you are big into comics and stuff, they're the things that look like little blades right below the pec on like Captain America and all that. That's called your serratus anterior. But all that stuff still needs to be in the torso, no matter how much you toy with it and play with the proportion and the size of it, right? Because you still need that small little proportion to be believable. So that's why, yes, thank you, Tessa. Really, really cool muscles that look like little knives. But yeah, you can easily turn really technical drawings into simplified, streamlined anatomy just with a strong understanding of it. Serrated knives. Oh my gosh, look what he did. And here, using flat colored shapes, we can even see how these simplified forms are broken down in TB Choi's head. The thighs, I mean, there's a lot of muscles in your thighs, but as long as you know that the backside is more flat until it curves up into the glute area, and that the front with your when your leg is fully extended, your quads actually are compressed, so they bunch up, and that's where you get that bump right there. That is the quads in the leg. But due to this pose, that is compressed more, so you get that really nice kind of shape right there. And this is all stuff that she just does in her head because she has the knowledge of it, right? So she doesn't have to think about what's in here. She just kind of knows from her years of studying and doing this. And I think we all know by now that with enough time dedicated and put into something, that eventually you too can get to a point where you don't need to think about the stuff underneath the skin. Yes, use yourself as reference. Take pictures of yourself for reference. Use reference. There's nothing wrong with it. Oh, okay, Dasha, you're good. Yeah, you use yourself as reference. There's a lot of variation in the human body. That's why a lot of the stuff I've said on average or like average, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I think you guys get it because there are obviously outliers to it. There are like me, for example. Fun fact about me, my wingspan, like fingertip to fingertip, is actually taller than I am. Because my arms are longer compared to my body size than my like legs and stuff. Sketchfab has amazing Anatomy 3D models. There are really cool apps on the iPad and stuff. I can link later. Wimmer suggested to me. I think they might be like $5, but they're super awesome with like full range of like posing and whatnot. And yes, I am a spider monkey. Head construction. The head can be broken down into basic forms, like right in here, right? You got the little eyeball, which is circle, little triangle nose, kind of an oval where the mouth and the teeth stick out. Yes, the Steam Anatomy things are also the apps that I'm talking about because I have them on all platforms. It's really cool because Steam will count it as a game, so you can get hours in the app. But the basic head construction can be broken down into different shapes, and like from there you can position those shapes differently in space, and it'll allow you to draw heads in perspective if it's something that you struggle with. And then for variations, you just would manipulate like how wide or how long the jaw is, or how large, how sharp the nose is. You can even play with the brow and how much it juts out. It's all things that can be toyed with once you understand the purpose and what function and form they have. And a simplification of all those different muscles, because again, underneath, when it's skin is thrown over top, a lot of this stuff can get lost. Not all of it. The cheekbones, for example, in the upper side, the the top of your brow usually will always catch light in comparison to other spots in the face, just because of the angle that they sit and how they are extruded from the body. Or even just above your upper lip because of how our mouths are formed. More than often, in an average case, light will catch right there, just to the sides of the little ridge underneath your nose. The skin definitely takes out having to learn all of the muscles. You just have to learn the area where skin to bone or skin to like muscles is very thin. In the collarbone, anyone who's had Dudge, the Happy Little Magic Fairy Village, it's where your collarbone kind of careens back towards your scapula. That spot, typically on most people, it'll always be bony, right? There's no fatty tissue that covers over top that. Just like the sternum and ribs, usually it's like the 10th rib it sticks out on some people, or there's like an indentation if you are okay. Sorry, I have a really dry mouth right now and I don't have any water. Okay. So typically the 10th rib will stick out and the sternum, as well as your hips, will also usually stick out from, or at least always be like a skin to bone. Not necessarily stick out. I don't want to imply that like it's just like when the video game model bugs out and you've got like a big triangle on the screen. It's not like that. It's just that those areas will like typically be skin to bone. So you will either have on a really skinny figure, that part will jut out some, or on a larger, heavier set figure, there will be indentations. Like if you take your shoulder, right, you can feel it right there. There is a bump. And that's where your collarbone and your scapula meet. And that spot is also a spot that typically will be bone to skin. But if you raise your arm up and your deltoid starts to gobble it up, it actually is still there. It just starts to become a acronym process. It's been a little bit. But if you raise up your arm, it'll instead form a dimple where there just isn't any other tissue there besides quite literally the bone and skin. So there's nothing that like replaces that. It leaves for really unique ways to play around with your figures and your posing, knowing what areas you can get away with throwing on more squish, or areas that you can utilize to draw the eye. Also, on the back of the head, there's a spot where your spine and your brainstem kind of jut out some. I think it's the 10th. Yeah, I believe it's C7. Yeah. Oh, C7. I was like 3 off. My bad. Yeah. C7. It's like a little triangular spot on the back that typically the bone will jut out there as well. And they're just good little landmarks that help you keep track of your proportions. Feet. We all hate to draw them, but sometimes we just cannot escape it, and we have to draw feet. I have a project series going on right now that has a lot of like Grecian sandals, and I've actually had to try and draw feet, and it's been a very painful experience. But you can break it down into basic shape, just like everything else, right? So you got that first basic shape where it is a kind of rectangle, kind of not. It's got a little bit of a triangular slope to it. But then you cut away a little bit of that top half because the foot has a slope to it, if you aren't aware. And the slope is directly tied to right here. going down to the big toe. That is like the ridge of the slope. From there, it is down and it descends down towards the bottom of the foot, and that's probably just due to the different size toes we have, right? It's not an unreasonable jump. It isn't just a simple rectangle, unfortunately, though. It does have a lot of varying shape and angles to it. Sinex actually describes toes as little staircases, which kind of began helping me draw them personally. But it took some adjusting to it because I always kind of thought that toes were like these little sausages or like little noodles, right? Like little slender doggies. But actually, after watching his video, which he has a whole quick anatomy series, I totally suggest you check out. After watching that, I did kind of realize that the toe kind of goes up in straight outward and then slopes downward. And so that started helping me in drawing my feet more. Just because it literally came down to a simple fact of it wasn't as simple as I thought I could make it. I was trying to simplify it too much, and thus I was losing some of the form, and it just read very poorly. Asymmetrical design. It is something that is inherent with the human body. I believe there's like a weird fact that like apparently every single thing on your body is bigger than the other. So like one of your eyeballs is bigger than like the other one. Your left ear might be bigger than your right ear, etc. Not like by large amounts, but sometimes they can be large amounts, but on average it's like maybe like a centimeter or two. So most people don't realize it. But everything is asymmetrical, including like feet. our ankle, the fibula actually reaches down lower than the tibia, so your ankle is actually askew. It's off centered and it's not symmetrical. One of them is higher than the other. Typically, the outer ankle, outer side of the ankle, is the one that dips down lower, just because that's usually where the fibula is at, unless there's something wrong, then I suggest you go to a doctor. Your leg might be twisted. I kid. But something else to keep in mind with the foot, though, is that more often than not, it's going to be bearing the weight of the body. So there's this kind of squish that happens with it. And it's something that you can play around with and toy with to give kind of a more dynamic shape to the feet that you're drawing, if it's something that you want to incorporate into your style. Because ultimately, all style is an amalgam of things that you like and things that you want to draw like, as well as things that make sense for you and come naturally to you to work in a quicker fashion. That's kind of all it really comes up to. But a lot of things in the foot are asymmetrical. The inner side has the ball of the foot, where if you're wiggling your big toe, you can kind of think about it like your toe knuckles, right? Because of the big toe, your knuckle on that side kind of goes out farther. It has the arch underneath it. I used to just draw my feet as very flat triangle shapes, and the triangle shape isn't necessarily wrong, but there's a lot of other things that I was missing out on that I will get to in a moment. Building up to it. The other bane of artists is hands, and hands aren't as muscular as other parts of the body. There's a lot more tendons and bone than there is necessarily muscle. And tendons follow the fingers and can often be seen under the skin depending on how the hand is positioned. If you try it out with your own hand, you can look what happens when you wiggle your fingers. You can kind of see them, the tendons moving under the skin. Or if you want to take it even further, you can take your arm, looking at your forearm just below the elbow, and you can wiggle your fingers, and you can see the extensors moving. And it's a very fun experience, and will make you feel like you got a little baby alien in your arm. The phalanges have a form that allows them to curl inward. The form can vary. Yeah, the form can change and vary. You can give a character sausage link fingers. You can give them very spindly and skinny bone-like fingers, right? If on a kind of bored on the creepy horror aesthetic, you just have to keep in mind that fingers curl with the knuckle, forming an L shape. The knuckle is not necessarily like a stationary thing. It does turn some when you bend your fingers. And keep in mind, obviously, like usually fingers have 3 sections to them, unless you're making like an alien race, that might be different. If you have a character that maybe they were like a thief in like a medieval setting and they got caught once, so they like had part of their finger chopped off, right? And so one of their fingers only has like one little segment to it. Like these are all fun design things that we can keep in mind and we can play with because we know how things normally work and what the precedent is, like what precedent has been set, right? The rule that was established. We know it. So like I said earlier, we can break it and we can play around and have more distinct and interesting designs as a result. And these are strong fundamentals that'll go a long way with you if you get them down and practice them and get a solid understanding. There is, however, an additional detail to level up your figure drawing skills. The secret ingredient to good anatomy. Drum roll. It's rhythm. The human body is like an orchestra or a sheet of music. There's an ebb and flow that yearns to be seen and heard, right? So rhythm and form, it's very noticeable in legs especially. The way that the body shifts and twists inward and outward. This flow and motion, it can make for very powerful impacts in your character drawing. Especially if you learn on like this figure right here on the left, you got that harsh, very almost flat edge to it, right? And then on this other side, you have all these intrinsic curves and rhythms dancing throughout the form and the figure that are accentuated because of such a hard, straight edge. And then of note right here, that straight bone right there, that is in the hip. Iliac crest, and that's another area where typically you'll either have a skin to bone or a dimple right there. Just because it's an area where there's nothing on the surface of that bone. But yeah, there's a flow to it, right? It's almost like if you ever got taught how to draw an arm and you got taught to like draw the arm going this way and then that way. That's another example of this ebb and flow that is inherently in the body. Rhythm is all throughout the body. I'll show more examples in a second. Playing with the rhythm is how you level up as an artist, though. You can break the patterns in the rhythm to get a desired effect, to show how or where weight is coming or impacting on a form, or just to simply accentuate forms. A lot of Blizzard art really accentuates like curves, mostly in like a lot of female figures because their male characters are typically boxy and bulky, like Reinhardt versus Tracer, for example, right? Reinhardt's quite literally just a big rectangle, whereas Tracer is this supposed to be this idea of like dexterous, nimble, she's quick, she's fast, right? These are examples of how you can play with these. Yeah, lineup comparison. Widowmaker versus like Reaper or McCree, Tracer versus Lucio, or even Genji, right? Genji is supposed to be another example of that nimble, agile, quick character, right? Very, very on par with Tracer. And I don't think that's his. Oh, that's his Overwatch 2 outfit, I think. But yeah. He also, in his form, had a lot of different areas where the form changed really quickly and you got this like rhythm in him. They did a lot of his with like the mix of like his like mech suit and stuff, whereas with Tracer it's definitely more of like a natural like just body type kind of thing they played with. But like those forms have that rhythm to them that is juxtaposed by like big brawny character like Torbjorn or Reinhardt. They're just boxes, right? Yeah, so like Genji is designed sleek, nimble. They play with that rhythm in him. Actually, coming to looking at this image that Ethan just posted, there's a very big resonance with Genji's swords and even just like how his legs curl that I had never noticed before.
I also
But-
never noticed like the muscle groups that they imply through his metal.
Mhm.
Like that's so cool. Like you can see the serratus anterior muscles there on the side. Like that's so awesome.
You can also see the deltoid with that shoulder guard, the
And like
pectoralis.
the front metal plate is like in the same exact like rhythm that your abs would be. That's so cool.
It's crazy, man. Anatomies everywhere. All I'm saying. And if this is something that isn't to your skill yet, you can totally just do something with like a cylinder and like a circle for the knee and like the basic form, right? You can build upon it. It's totally fine to learn from this. Obviously, everyone wants to be somewhere around this, right? Who doesn't? But it's fine if you're here right now. It's just about understanding what the intentions are with the form. Let your legs flow like water. As whoa? I don't know what that's from, but that's a really neat monster design. But yeah, honestly, I said this to a friend that's taking a constructive animal anatomy class right now. If you ever needed help, let me know, because I like human anatomy is very on par and akin to animal anatomy, because surprise, surprise, I hate to be the one to bear this news, humans are animals. We might like to think that we're sophisticated and we're fancy and all that, but we're animals too. So a lot of anatomy carries over, right? I say like one thing and you guys like instantly are so quick to jump on the meme train. Yeah, Martin, correct. Anatomy is in mecha too, because mechs are just metallic, cable-y humans more often than not, or animals for that matter. For any like beast mechs like Voltron and stuff. But yeah, there is a flow in the body, is what my point was. Getting back on track. Oh, I clicked off of it. Oh no. There we go. Thick or thin, even switching to more muscular forms or spindly legs, right? There's still a rhythm and a dance that is being displayed and communicated. And of just note real quick, that little green square on that knee, that's where typically the knee juts out at, and will catch a highlight from a higher light source. Obviously, if you have a light below it, it's going to cast a shadow instead. But just a quick note that the knee has the patella that can often get masked by different muscle and tendons in that area, but there is a part of it that does usually directly catch a highlight, as shown in the beautiful render. Oh. Oh wow, yeah. Genji's design does look really similar to Raiden. That's crazy. Arms. Arms have lots of wonderful muscle groups with tons of insertions and plane changes. I personally legs can be fun, right? But it mostly comes down to that generic shape of the calf and the generic shape of the thigh, right? But arms, arms, you have the deltoid, you have the biceps brachia, you have the triceps. On power lifters, there's actually a group of muscles beneath the bicep called like they're usually called like power muscles because like biceps and triceps are beach muscle because it's surface stuff, but there's muscles underneath that actually are responsible for a lot more of like the power and the force being driven from it. But yeah, on certain figures you can even see like those muscles. It's crazy to see. It literally looks like there are two more little bumps that just kind of pop out in the side of the arm, which is normally like flat for people. But yeah, arms are awesome just because there's just so much there. And like most of what I've listed so far is all in the upper arm, right? In your forearm, you have different biceps, you have different flexors and extensors that are responsible for moving your fingers and your wrists and all that, and like turning your wrists. So if you ever just like have a moment, literally just take your body and like play around with it. just move parts of your body around and see how the anatomy responds. Like if you didn't know this, if you take your arm, you bend it, right? And you take your hand and you twist it forward, almost like you're like making your arm a snake. It relaxes your bicep and will extend it downward. But if you flex that hand inward, it'll shrink the bicep up. It's crazy. Anatomy is really, really fun. I totally am a big proponent of like using yourself to learn it. I almost said touching yourself, but I realized that would have sounded wrong. I actually think Dove said that in class one time, like for the joke of it. But the form can change depending on how the arm is flexed. Pushing motions flex your triceps and extensors, whereas pulling motions will flex biceps and flexors. And this is very similar for your legs too. If you bring your leg up, your quads relax because they're a push muscle. So if you extend your leg out, that's when your quads flex. So like learning muscle function can also just be really, really helpful for drawing your anatomy. And it can the different ways that you display the body and play with how it's just a dance of push and pull. That's what I've been getting at with all like the rhythm stuff. It's a very large dance of push and pull, because when you're doing one thing, the other side of that is relaxed and out of the picture. But knowing how the muscles work will help you recognize what areas need to have spots of flats, or what areas need to be more round and sharp with plane changes of a flex muscle. So I keep getting a tad off topic. Here's a great example. TB Choi did like a little life drawing study. Personally, I always feel like life drawing pictures and stuff, they end up looking more stiff, and it's up to us as the artists to give it life and give it rhythm and give it movement. So her drawings definitely, she accentuates that hip area. She accentuates how the body is turning and twisted. It's still on par with the life drawing and a good replication, but it's definitely got a little bit more drama to it. And once more, in the arm, in the face, in the legs, everything, there is a constant rhythm of this like flow and almost like you can think of it like energy, right? Metal conducts electricity and energy through something, or hold on. Yeah. Energy and electricity are not the same thing. Okay, so think about it like this. If you are going to punch, you are building up that energy to send your fist into a punching bag, someone's face, a wall, whatever your target is. I'm not going to get into that. kinetic energy, right? If you just stand up straight and you throw a punch, it's really weak, right? It's very ineffective. Like, yeah, you can hit hard, but it's not as powerful as if you are quite literally putting your entire body into it, and you're pushing down with your legs, and you're twisting with your like abdomen, and you are like full force just sending that fist forward with like literally every fiber of your body, right? And that's the dance. The dance was throwing that punch, and as a result, all throughout your body, this different rhythm and flow is happening because of that motion. Rhythm is everywhere. Like I said, you can use the principle in a face, legs, arms, throughout the entire pose. The dynamic shifts from long areas of rest, compact squish zones, and asymmetrical curves are powerful elements to implement into your figures. For an example, we want to show a great deal of effort and struggle is being used to pull this item, right? So how do we do this? Obviously, some of these examples feel a little stiff. Definitely a little bit more flat, whereas that drawing, it's exaggerated, right? And as designers, that is the freedom that we have to emphasize that pulling motion. And where it starts in the legs with a strong base, and it's there that the rhythm is formed and established for the entirety of the pose and action. Ready? Like, bam, you have that first initial like push off from the ground where the force of your body is meeting the force of the ground, and from there the entire body can respond in tow with that. So you get that strong base where there is a lot of pressure built up. Meanwhile, the rest of the upper body is kind of pulling backwards and pulling, but it's pushing down towards the legs. The arrows on the left side here should be flipped. That is my B. But everything is pulling this way and pushing down this way. It's redirecting the energy of pulling, the kinetic energy of pulling the rope into pushing onto the ground, which inherently just feeds itself into pushing on the rope more or pulling on the rope more. And you can always double check yourself to make sure that forms aren't reading as flat by just doing a little red line arrow thing. Explore how the image and how the pose is reading to you. If there aren't a lot of dynamic shifts and the pose is just stiff, right? So instead, that's when you take an eraser, you lightly go over it, and then you start to exaggerate stuff, and you start to give that push and pull of rest and excitement to bring that pose to life. I think this right here is a great example of where, just because of the nature of a camera, maybe, I don't know, the pose with the model looks a little bit more stiff, whereas this is exaggerated some, and there's like additional kind of oh yeah, sorry, I just saw your comment. You can pop in.
So this is something we talk a lot about in 351 for Casey's class. So if you look at the middle example with the lady with the big hair and the smug face, the juxtaposition of that really nice flat clear line with all the busyness of all the curves helps also sell that as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It's also very similar to the thing that Yanni and I discovered, where if you Google like anxious or nervous person, you quite often get a pose that has a very strong flat side, and then everything converging on the middle on the other side. Yeah, that's a great call out right there. To have that area of rest before the area of compact busyness. And once more, two very different poses that, due to the rhythm in the figure, they read as a moment of rest, plotting, or inspection, right? This creepy hunched over figure kind of looking down. Maybe it's like the scary grandma or something. I don't know. Versus a moment of excitement, action, and speed, right? That person is quite literally putting their whole body into throwing that ball. But how can this be changed, right? how can we change this initial read? Well, for example, if we take that question mark type figure and we scrunch up the legs and maybe like bring up the arms some, it'll look like it's prowling and ready to leap. Versus if we straighten up that person's legs, it's going to be a very half-hearted throw. With this example, it's a very, tit for tat like life drawing image, but it has slow lines, uneasy things. It's still a good life drawing pose, but I mean, you can really bring in drama by driving shoulders forward some, putting in that flow and through the arms, accentuating that pressure that is placed upon that lower back, right? With the curves that are utilized in the drawing. And you can take it a little bit farther. You can, this is very realistic. You can simplify it, right? And instead, kind of flatten them out in areas, or think about it like the human form is just a big bag of tissue in fat, right? Or like a balloon with water. It's very you can manipulate it a lot. And sometimes you can skip details of anatomy as long as it still reads correct. So obviously this is a no. Oh, Tassa, you don't even know. Suckling is one of Yanni and Mia's favorite artists, and Yanni put this Leona image as a emote in his server. Yeah, Suckling. Oh my gosh! Actually, thank you for bringing up Suckling. Suckling is an amazing example of really, really strong body language and expressions. I aspire to get expressions as beautiful and clean reading as Sucklings. Yeah, I totally suggest that you check them out. Yanni, if you can you please post some examples of Suckling's face stuff? I just don't have Twitter and all that stuff pulled up. Thank you. But yeah, so like I said, once you understand the rules and know everything that's going on, right? That's when you can just start to break rules and do what you want, and you get this very almost kind of Disney-esque in its simplicity drawing, but it's still an accurate read on the life drawing pose. And you can get a little bit more because of how simple it is. Like right here, you get a lot of squish and compaction and a lot of curves. With this, you can kind of give it more of a sharp, forceful kind of edge to it. It's just her breaking up the form of the torso and the shape that it's taking. That's capital O when it shouldn't be. Something that helps is thinking or acting out the movement, seeing where the force and momentum is coming from and where it's getting redistributed. Like I said earlier, it's like energy and where and how is the energy traveling. What is the cadence of the song? In some of these poses, right, you got the twisting form of all that weight coming down on that leg, whereas you've got a very harsh, fast kick that is being driven downwards. You've got this pose where all that pressure is being built upon that one leg, whereas everything else is exploding outward in this dramatic all eyes on me kind of display. Similar to that other kick that I analyzed, this one, you have all that pressure on that crunch right there in that toe, right on that foot, all that crunch of this entire pose and weight as this person is forcefully driving down into a heel kick. And what does this all culminate to? What am I getting at, right? It's that once you understand basic fundamentals of anatomy, and you have good forms and figures, and you implicate rhythm into your figures to inform the viewer of maybe a story or an action, or just informing the viewer as to what pose the figure is carrying, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be like a story, like I think I made up a story for these ones, right? It doesn't always have to be something like that. It's this, right? Once you have an understanding of the basic forms and the rhythm, you can have a lot of fun exploring different anatomical setups for your characters. This person, A, right? Letter A is a strong, bulky refrigerator, right? Letter B is, without looking at the inner design and like how crazed they look, the pose is very unhinged. There's a lot of jagged edges. It reads dangerous and unhinged, as I said. Whereas C is collected. It's plotting. It is, deep in thought or contemplation. There's all this rhythm in that form and in that figure that just oozes throughout it. From the ears curling in, from the tail, the hat curling in, even the edge of the hat. And then this, letter D, right? Letter D is another, very similar to A. It's a very strong, sturdy kind of figure with a very imposing pose. And that is done through the rhythm used and the mix of flats and curves. Again, A, same story. A big, bulky, strong refrigerator shield of a man. You have B, this dexterous, lithe, maybe assassin, maybe a swordsman, a duelist, something. It doesn't matter, right? The important part is that from the hair that quite literally curls through the entire form, from the curved blades, the curve in the legs and in the body positioning, this rhythm just bleeds throughout the figure. Same for this little guy. Very squat. Almost like old man baby type. And a lot of the rhythm in the form just helps convey that. Right here, another strong refrigerator type. You've got luscious curves and a very like self-confident pose, right? That person's feeling themselves, and you can get that through the visual language used in the pose. Whereas that third one, they're hanging their head, their shoulders are bent, knees weak, arms are heavy, mom spaghetti, that kind of stuff, right? And then same for number 4, right? There's number 2. It's this person that's absolutely just feeling themselves in the moment, and every bit of visual language and rhythm and form in them, it speaks to that. Same body types, right? Different personalities. This person was absolutely feeling themselves and was confident. This person is uptight, quite literally like looks like they have like a big wedgie and they're just cranky and upset. This person, this person's cocky. He's ready for a scrap. This guy looks nice. He looks like he gives very good hugs, right? And this person looks kind of like Junkrat. And then this person, it's definitely less of a yeah, I'm hot shit, and more of like a cocky kind of like, yeah, I'm hot shit, dude. Like, I'm they've got glasses. They've got kind of like docs. I don't really know what their outfit is. Maybe they're like the lead explorer, right? Like because of the visual language that is used, even with the same body type, it just reads super, super well, and has a lot of personality and character to it. And yeah, rhythm and form, peeps. That's what this is all about. That is what figure drawing and anatomy is all about. Figure out your rhythms for your characters. Figure out what forms you want to use, and you're gonna like super level up your anatomy. And at this time, I'm cool with opening up to any questions people might have, or just unmuting people to kind of have a collective community kind of talk. And in the meantime, I will also look through. Yes, I love Suckling stuff so much. I agree with Yanni. They have some of the best expressions I've seen on a lot of artists, and I could look at it for days. There's so much storytelling and just absolute wonderful content in their art.
Are we unmuting people, or people can stay muted if they want?
So people can stay muted if they want.
Yeah.
I think someone has a little bit of feedback, so I'm just gonna go ahead and mute them real quick. But yeah, people can bounce if you have other things to do. I get it. It's midterms. I appreciate all of you for coming. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I appreciate everyone for coming too. It's just been a rough quarter all around. So
True facts.
yeah, I think Chris, you were mainly talking about Dove as a professor.
Oh, no,
dismissed.
there were a few professors mentioned. Dove, I definitely mentioned a few times.
That was awesome.
Yeah, he's super big anatomy, but you could probably get away with just taking one of his anatomy classes if you want to keep another extracurricular thing for another class. Atkins, also a great anatomy artist. Him and Dove actually taught underneath the same person. Glenn Vilpu, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Atkins and Dove quite literally draw the same. It's funny. But yeah.
They share notes too.
Let's say I mentioned Low. He's really good for environments, perspective, and like that kind of stuff.
He also has gorgeous figures. Low is amazing at figures, but he doesn't teach.
He doesn't teach about it though. He just posts on Facebook his daily drawings, and you're like,
and his daily drawings are like the best thing you've ever seen in your life.
I'm like, your daily drawings are better than my week-long assignment. What the heck? And yeah, Dasha, like literally, just check out Suckling. Their art is so amazing and so good. So very good.
A huge suggestion I've been getting into since, like, I don't know, as concept artists, there's obviously like a studio that a lot of us really want to work at, and looking at how they tackle anatomy will really help in terms of applying and getting in with them. Like looking at how Riot tackles anatomy versus like Blizzard, or like even a really realistic game, just like figuring it out. It's a lot of fun too, and it'll make you look better. So
yeah, I started doing that with like I said, I feel like everyone probably already knows this, that Riot's definitely a company that's on my list to break into the industry with. Obviously, there's other places that I'd like to go after, but like Riot, Six More Vodka, like I started doing like a lot of different studies about how they do anatomy, just because that's a great tip. Find the people that you want to work for or that inspire you. break down and figure out how and what they do, and build it and incorporate it into your own stuff. Be an art thief.
Literally.
Yeah, quite literally.
Just take it, like do studies off of like your favorite concept artists at a studio you want to work at, and do those studies, and then take the studies that you did and do like a project or something incorporating that. It's like the fastest speed run you could get building really good portfolio pieces.
I was also
Steal and cheat.
talking to Colin Rudd the other day, and he mentioned that like he knew a kid, or like he heard of a person who was a graphic designer who wanted to get into Naughty Dog. So they literally made their resume in the like graphic design style of Naughty Dog and added like an art director or something, and they got in as a result. So
That's how it
mimicry,
works.
it's like, what is it? Mimicry is the best form of,
Flattery.
yeah.
I get it though.
There's can I add in something real quick?
Yeah.
There's one art study book that I don't see anybody ever talk about that kind of changed my whole life on anatomy. And I sent it to Chris. I know that part of this talk came from here. It's called The Anatomy of Style by Patrick Jones. And it's directed at people who are kind of past that constructive step of anatomical drawing. So once you like have that like form, those form ideas down, you can render objects in 3D space. You can place things in 3D space. This book is about like really kind of becoming a figure artist. And what I mean by that is that it's about the rhythm and flow of the body, and the way that we kind of exaggerate the shapes of certain groups and things. These ski slopes of like the human anatomy, and these kind of like abstracted, constructive shapes that give you the movement, and then how you can push and pull those shapes to kind of construct your own style or interpretation of anatomical rendering. It is super, super good. It's definitely not the first book I would read when you want to learn how to do anatomy and figure drawing and stuff, but it definitely is the last one I would read on it. And it totally changed the way that I do figure studies and everything, because I feel like SCAD is really good at that constructive part. But I've only had 2 professors really teach the okay, now actually do the thing with the figure that you're trying to do part. Like talking about the flow of the body, the posing, the rhythm, like not just like posing with like putting the shapes there, but like making it a pose, like making it a real, like aesthetic, juicy, real pose, right? That has like good stylization, good shape language. And one of them doesn't work at SCAD anymore, but it's a super, super good book. I would definitely check it out. It's too big for me to just drop on Discord, but if you PM me your email, I'll email it to you.
Yes, please. I was looking at the book just right now, and some of the studies, like some of the pages that are pulled out on his site, are like gorgeous.
Yeah, he's a fucking amazing artist. It's super good. I literally it's this is one book I've never seen anybody talk about, and it actually changed the way that I do figure drawing like almost entirely from the ground up. Super, super good. It does skip the whole constructive part though. So if you haven't read Lake Forest, or if you haven't done constructive figure drawing before, it's kind of taking that for granted. So you should definitely get that foundation first, but it's like the next step after that.
So cool.
I browsed through it earlier because he gave me or sent it to me to help with this talk, but it was a lot to digest. So unfortunately, I couldn't bring any of it into the talk.